Welcome to the UFC 312 prop drop, where I talk about every single matchup very briefly and highlight my favorite props for every single matchup to try to help you guys cash some plus money spots and maybe even fuel long shots as well. Stay tuned to the end of the segment where I drop my 3 favorite prop bets as well as a long shot that I'll be tracking in the description below. So let's try to get this on the road here. So without wasting too much time, let's get right into it. First fight of the night, Hyung-Sung Park going up against Nyamjagal Tumendemberel. I believe Park has an advantage in every aspect of this fight. Obviously, the knockout power of Tumendemberel is something to worry about a little bit, which you can actually cash at plus 600 if that's the prop that you end up going with. But the prop that I like the most is going to be Hyung-Sung Park by submission at plus 220. I think he eventually gets this to the ground, and I think he strangles Tumendemberel within 2 rounds. And again, the head spot, KO for Tumendemberel, plus 600. Next up, killing Salkilld going up against Anshul Jubli. I think Salkilld is the better fighter overall here, better striker, better grappler, but it's going to be the latter that he ends up leaning on here to get Jubli to the ground, snatch up a submission, and force the tap, and you can get Salkilld by submission at plus 250. On the flip side for Jubli, if you were to win this, I think it'll be maybe a Hail Mary knockout, but I just don't see that coming to fruition. I'd be very surprised if Salkilld fumbles the bag here. So once again, I'm going to go with Salkilld by sub at plus 250. Next up, Kevin Jousset going up against Jonathan Micallef. I believe this fight ends up paying the scorecards due to Micallef's tenacity with seeking takedowns and looking to get fights into the grappling realm. I think we saw Jousset showcase great takedown defense against Brian Battle last time around, and a lot of that can be attributed to his judoka background, which has allowed him to implement a few trips and throws whenever opponents get a little bit too overzealous with their takedowns. And then on the feet, Jousset clearly has the advantage, but is not a guy that often chases finishes. He'll tenderize that lead leg by attacking the lead calf of his opponents, following up with some straight shots down the pipe. But I believe a lot of his damage in this matchup is going to be against the cage while defending takedowns. I think you'll win this fight on the scorecards. You can get the fight to go to decision at minus 125 or Jousset to win by decision at plus 165, which are my 2 favorite props for this matchup. Next up, Rongzhu going up against Cody Steele. The public loves them some Cody Steele, and so do I, but not so much in this matchup, especially at these chalky odds. He's a tremendous grappler, but people are failing to realize that he is not the greatest wrestler, so it'll be harder for him to get this fight to the ground, especially against a guy in Rongzhu who has stated that grappling is clearly the flaw in his game in his initial stint with the UFC, and since then he's done a great job in terms of rectifying that issue so he can keep fights standing where he feels most comfortable throwing down with his hands. I believe he has a striking advantage here, which might take a little bit longer to implement once Cody Steele realizes that he may not be the better striker, and I actually see this fight going the full 15 minutes. I think Rongzhu winning by decision at plus 750 is a great spot to pull the trigger on, but already taking him as an underdog is not too bad either. If he does have an even bigger striking advantage than I expect him to have, the knockout prop at plus 390 is not too bad either. And then for Cody Steele, I don't think he ends up finishing Rongzhu. If he wins, I think it goes to a decision. So him to win by a decision at plus 290. But my favorite prop, like I said, for this matchup, I think Rongzhu by decision plus 750. Sign me up. Our next up, the UFC debut of both Colby Thicknesse and the brother of featherweight champion Ilia Topuria. We got Alexandre Topuria coming in as a big favorite here against Thicknesse. When you watch Alexandre fight, he fights very similarly to his brother. He loves to walk his opponents down, throwing big hooks with a lot of power, and I think that's going to pay off for him here as he corrals Thicknesse early on in this cage, gets him up against, early on in this fight, corrals him up against the cage, lands his big shots, and I think he eventually puts him out. You can get Topuria round 1 knockout at plus 320. I think he finishes this fight one way or another, but I think that prop is probably the best way to go about it. All right, next up, Wang going up against Bruna Brasil. Wang looking to bounce back after that loss to Gabriela Fernandez a couple months back. And I think we'll see a more tepid-paced version of her than we've seen in the past. I think we'll see her utilize her disciplined striking to touch up Brasil from distance and put combinations together to really show to the judges that she should win this fight once it ends up hitting the scorecards. You can get it at plus 100, which I'm not overly hyped about, but that is the method of victory I think she wins by most likely. And then on the flip side for Brasil, for her to win by submission is plus 1,300. With her teaming up with the guys over there at Fighting Nerds, we saw one of her best performances last time around against Molly McCann. If she's able to successfully get this fight to the ground once again, she might be able to find that back of Wang and eventually get the submission herself. But I do believe that Wang has good enough takedown defense. Again, if you guys remember the Fernandez fight, that was a club and sub. Maybe Brasil can produce one of those again as well. But I do think we'll see a much more disciplined and striking defense-oriented version of Wang, but that will still allow her to get ahead on the scorecards here by landing more effective damage and winning on the scorecards, like I said, plus 100 for her to win by decision. All right, Vyacheslav Borshchev going up against Tom Nolan in a fight that is sure to produce fireworks. I expect both these guys, no matter how they end up, or no matter who ends up winning, for it to come by knockout. Obviously, on the Borshchev side, which is the guy that I'm picking to win this fight, I think is technically superior striking. Will be able to exploit some of the striking defense issues we've seen from Nolan throughout his career, and I think that will lead to Borshchev getting a knockout, which you can bet at plus 160. On the flip side for Nolan, to win by knockout, plus 230, not a bad line there. But if somehow Nolan's chin ends up holding up here, I still believe Borshchev can put together a better body of work. So if this fight does reach the scorecards, you can bet him to win by decision at plus 500. But again, like I said, I think it's going to be Borshchev and Borshchev by knockout at plus 160. All right, Jack Jenkins going up against Gabriel Santos here. I do like Santos. I don't mind the chalk on him. I think he puts together a good enough body of work to go out there and win this fight over the course of 15 minutes. I think he lands more emphatic shots. I think he chews up the leg of Jack Jenkins while in turn shutting down the calf kicking game of Jenkins. But I think that we see Santos win this fight, with his grappling, with his striking, a full MMA game, winning it on the scorecards. You can get that at plus 130. If Santos is clean enough with the striking and lands on the button of Jenkins, it's absolutely possible he can put him away and you can get his knockout prop at plus 600. But like I said, I'm thinking more so decision here at plus 130. Next up, Jake Matthews going up against Francisco Prado. Prado is a juggernaut of a striker who likes to get things done early. If he can goat Jake Matthews into striking with him inside the pocket early in this fight, that absolutely leaves a path for Prado to get that first round knockout, which currently sits at plus 900. But the prop that I'm going to be leaning on for this matchup is Jake Matthews by decision at plus 115. I think we'll see him lean on his grappling just like he did in his last round against Phil Rowe. And to stay away from that heavy power of Prado, he's going to have to get to that classic Jake Matthews wrestling style. And I think with him maturing, getting better, and wanting to get some consistency with some wins, we'll see a smarter performance out of him here. And for him to win at plus 115 by decision, much better than taking a little bit of the chalk that you're seeing on his line. All right, next up, Rodolfo Bellato going up against Jimmy Crute, a fight that I fully expect to finish inside the distance, which I believe currently sits at minus 350 for the fight to not hit the scorecards. But I'm going to lean with Bellato to win by knockout at plus 155. I think his defensive grappling is good enough to keep this fight upright, which will force Crute to make plenty of mistakes in the striking, just as we've seen him make in the past. On the flip side, Jimmy Crute by submission, which I think is his best path to victory here, is sitting at plus 1,200. That is a crazy line, considering that's the way that he most often looks to end up winning his fights. But Bellato, like I said, has improved his defensive grappling, and that will allow him to keep this fight standing, where he'll eventually find that knockout. All right, next up, heavyweights going at it here as we have Justin Tafa going up against Thaleson Teixeira. I am leaning with the UFC newcomer here, standing at 6'7" with a BJJ black belt. Can you believe that we're getting his submission prop at plus 1,100? That's a spot that I'm going to be looking to take a shot on here. I expect him to go out there, look to get this fight to the ground sooner than later, rather than leaving himself vulnerable to getting knocked out by Tafa, who is clearly a knockout machine. You can get Tafa by knockout at plus 170, which is usually how he ends up getting the job done. And Teixeira has some questionable striking defense, where we've seen opponents hit him in the past, even though he has such a big height and reach advantage over a lot of his opponents. Tafa can clearly crash the pocket and land that big power if he needs to, which is why I think Teixeira if him and his team are smart enough, are going to look to tie up Tafa sooner than later and drag this fight to the ground where he's going to be too big and too heavy for Tafa to get off of him. And then from there, I think Teixeira should find a position to either get a arm triangle choke or a rear naked choke. One of those two, plus 1100. I'm willing to take the shot there. All right, co-main event. Women's strawweight title on the line. I do believe Suarez is the side here, picking her to win at minus 125. Not a bad spot, but the prop that I'm looking at is for her to win by submission at plus 300. We know that that's what she's going to be looking for more often than not. Obviously, since being with the Bellator bantamweight champion, Patchy Mix, she's clearly improved that aspect of her game. Even if they weren't together, I'm sure that's something she wants to improve. But Patchy Mix is one of the best submission specialists in the bantamweight division. And to pass those skill set on to Suarez, I think it's starting to show off. And once Zhang leaves her neck open there, I think Suarez will take it on home with her. I think she'll eventually find the back of Wiley or even just snatch onto a guillotine when Wiley makes a little bit too, if she sprawls a little bit too early or just makes a bit of a mistake, and that will allow Suarez to latch onto her neck. Suarez to win by submission, plus 300. Suarez to win by submission in round 2, which is what she's been doing as of late, plus 1,500. I think that's worth a shot as well. And then on the flip side for Zhang, we know Suarez has some work to do in terms of the striking, and if Zhang can keep this fight upright and slow Suarez down, I can absolutely see a scenario where she ends up getting a barrage of strikes together and getting that TKO victory, which you can get at plus 300. But the one that I'm going to go with, Suarez sub plus 300, Suarez sub round 2 plus 1,500. All right, main event, middleweight title on the line. Jenkins to Plessis looking to defend his title for the second time, but also looking for his second victory over Strickland. Now, I believe Strickland will pick it up a little bit more than he did in the past fight. I think he'll be able to really wear down du Plessis, utilize that front kick, utilize his pace, his pressure, his forward movement, his volume striking, rolling with the shots so du Plessis can't get away with an early finish here. And I think he'll continue to keep that pressure on, and that will allow him to run away with this matchup in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th round. I think Strickland, seeing what he was able to do in the 5th round of their last fight, maybe tries to pick it up even sooner in the 4th round so that he can actually get more rounds scored in his favor. Strickland to win by decision, plus 260. Du Plessis to win by decision, plus 175. I fully expect this fight to end up hitting the scorecards. Conspiracy theory time, though. Strickland has a BJJ background as well that he can lean on. We don't see him do that because he loves to strike so often. But if he really wants to make an impression on the judges, maybe mixing it up in the grappling realm a bit could allow him to get some dominant positions here against du Plessis, which could eventually lead to a submission win. Now, it's been a long time since he's won by submission. I believe he has 4 wins by submission on his record. But if he can get du Plessis to the ground and utilize that BJJ, submission plus 2,900 for Strickland, not a bad gamble. I mean, considering that he should have the advantages there, it all just comes down to if that's the style that he wants to look to implement. So I'm going to go Strickland here. Strickland by decision, plus 260, but the long shot that I'm going to consider here, sub plus 2,900. All right, let's get to the top 3 prop bets as well as the long shot that I'm going to go with here. Again, not going to explain them because I've already talked about them earlier on in this video. First best prop bet, Hyung Sung Park by submission plus 220. Second best prop bet, Alexandre Topuria round 1 knockout plus 320. Third best prop bet, Tatiana Suarez by submission plus 300. And the long shot I'm going to go with is Talison Teixeira by submission plus 1,100. There you guys go. Prop drop for UFC 312. That's a wrap on all the content that I got for this pay-per-view card. I'll be back next week for the UFC Vegas 102 breakdown. That's the only event that I'll be covering next week, so I can't wait for it. See you guys then. Good luck on our action this weekend, folks. I'll see you guys again next week. Peace.